Welcome back to another episode of Distribution Dialogues, where we bring leaders from the food service industry and talk shop. We really want this to be a real place to talk about life experiences in how we get food to the table of some of the best restaurants in North America. Today I've got Brad Yellock, the VP of Sales of Inland Foods, recently renamed from Inland Seafood. Many of you may know Inland Seafood. They're a predominant player in the Southeast for what started as seafood but has evolved into much more. Brad, why don't you give us a little background on Inland before we get started?
Sure. So we've been in the game per se since the mid 70s. So you can call it 40, almost 50 years. Starting on an idea from our current CEO that fish in the Southeast, just for lack of a better term, suck. Okay. And he was a writer, and he went out to did salmon fishing on the West Coast and was like, this fish is really good, and everything coming into Atlanta is frozen. It's not that great. So, he started bringing in fish and delivering on the back of his truck. And all these years later, here we are rebranding ourselves from Inland Seafood to Inland Foods on an idea that started from bringing fresh fish to the Southeast that's grown into a distribution center, 7 distribution centers strong with several other facilities that do everything from ready-made foods to lobster. So
It's so fun hearing stories like that of what started as a dream or one truck or one van, and now has blossomed into whatever entity it is. And as I'm starting my own journey in my new business, is like sometimes it's easy to get defeated when it's like you against the world, right? But it
right.
proves out time and time again. You look at Amazon, you look at Marriott, like all these things started as a single institution or a business or a small idea and evolved. And so, I think we all have our own
What did
battles.
Bezos do? He was selling books in a garage.
Yeah, and go back, and if you're looking for inspiration, just YouTube Amazon in the early days and watch a video, and just to think where his vision was to where it is. You're not crazy for having a dream and chasing it and getting to wherever it is. Like it can become reality through hard work, and it's always fun to just hear stories of that to where it is today. You specifically, you live in Birmingham, Alabama. You are an Auburn grad. You can see right here that I'm on the other side of the equation as an Ole Miss grad. But you are correct me if I'm wrong, but you love the outdoors and to hunt and fish. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of my thing.
Is that how you got into the food world?
Not at all. Like I had it was an accident, a fun accident, but I've grown up. I'm an Alabama guy through and through, and people ask me all the time, "Well, your corporate office is in Atlanta." I'm like, "Well, I drive a lot." And, actually, I'm talking to you guys here from our Nashville distribution center, where I'm working with this team for the next couple months, just to really grow this warehouse. But Alabama's home. It's my Birmingham's my big little city that I'm where my house sits. I'm 15 minutes from downtown and 25 minutes from my hunting club. So it's very hard to get this guy to move out of that city. But no, my getting into food service for me was, right out of my first big boy job was telecommunications. I worked for Sprint Business Solutions. I was a B2B sales rep. And then on the side, I like to hang out with people. I mean, you're an Ole Miss guy, so tailgating and hanging out with your buddies is kind of a Southern pastime, So I started cooking in barbecue tournaments only because I went to one and I thought it'd be parties, but everybody was having their own parties. So it's like, I want to throw my own. So I'm cooking in barbecue tournaments and selling cell phones, and picked up this account that was selling produce. It was called Dixieland Produce. I went and called on them, sold them their cell phones, serviced that account for several years, became friends with the president of that company, and he came out to a couple of barbecue tournaments, and I, actually won a few. It was kind of neat. Apparently I made good barbecue, but he asked me, he goes, you service my account really well. You're obviously good at food. Do you think you can sell produce? I tell people this all the time. My one question to him was, every time they buy, do I get paid? And he's like, yes. I was like, sign me up. Because coming from telecommunications, obviously my months, I was only as good as each month. And that was such a long-winded sell. And I thought, man, this will be kind of fun. So I took the job, and first account I walked into, I'll never forget that. It was a place called Dell's Southern Grill, and I
Was that
walked
in
in, and Dell
Birmingham?
was that was in Birmingham, and I walked in the account, and I was like, Chef, I sell vegetables. You cook vegetables. Maybe we got something to talk about. And he was like, yeah, maybe have a seat. Let's talk. And in my mind, when you come from a sales background, selling something like, an insurance or a cell phone, like a luxury item that nobody wakes up thinking, oh, let me call myself, to have somebody say, yeah, let's talk when you're used to getting the door shut on you all day. I was like, in my brain, I was like, oh, but on the outside, I kept it professional and closed that deal. But to me, it's always made this industry, like, at least when you go to your customer, you've got something that they need to talk about. So
Yeah.
that's how I accidentally ended up in this position and this business. And that was maybe 17 years ago.
So you started in the produce world, and how did you evolve into where you're at today?
So, produce, I started actually when I first got into it, the company that I worked for was trying to break into food service sales. They were really more of a distributor to, they sold to the food service companies or any other distribution company. So, I started making those sales calls, but I thought it was really cool what the guys were doing that were selling big trucks, like, kind of basically brokering tomatoes and watermelons and stuff like that. So I tested the waters on that. But I kept messing with selling the restaurants. But the problem I kind of started developing with produce was everybody's got a ingredient mushroom. Everybody sells tomatoes. Everybody was getting their Taylor Farms California truck. So it became this, you know, like, what can I do to be different kind of thing, right? And at the time, you know, people don't think about how much things have changed over, so like 17 years. 17 years ago, look at Facebook. 17 years ago, there was no Twitter. 17 years ago, like, your introductory to what's special with food was if you watched Food Network or if you read a lot, right? And so at the time, I'm watching a lot of Food Network, and Chopped was like my favorite show back then. And the only reason was people would open those baskets and you didn't know what you were getting. And I was watching it and I'm like, what is this produce these guys are doing? So I started trying to source that stuff. So I became the first person in Birmingham to really be very intentional about finding a watermelon radish, finding like Easter egg radish. It's like working with local farmer that's producing hydroponic arugula and taking him from a farmer's market and buying his products and selling it to the chefs. And you have some notable chefs in town: Frank Stitt, Chris Hastings, to James Beard winning, Hastings best restaurant or Stitt best restaurant in the nation back then. And I those guys would go on the market and the big produce market in Birmingham and buy from farmers. So I started beating them to the market, and I'd buy everything up first and then sell it to them. But I developed a reputation for being really, really aggressive in selling specialty produce, and somehow who would eventually hire me at Inland Seafood all the chefs started saying, this, you need this guy on your team. You need this guy. This guy wakes up and like he eats, breathes, and sleeps food. Because I mean, I do. So to shorten my long-winded story here, I got a call from Inland, and I wasn't really interested in leaving produce at all. I was having a great time. I was still, in my mid-20s, like I was like the man, and everybody's like, wait a second, you're going to leave produce. I'm like, yeah, I just kind of want to sell these meats. And it was about 2 years of going back and forth with Inland before I finally was like, I really want to sell proteins now, because I started studying it. But yeah, it was just aggressively selling produce in a different way, because I had a different sales background than most of the guys that were selling produce. A lot of the guys came up in distributions or they came from farms, so they were good at being really nice, selling a good tomato, selling a good carrot or whatever. But I was like, how can I do this different? And it turns out different was kind of good at the time for Inland Seafood.
Well, and a case of tomatoes is far different than a case of prime tenders from a
Yeah.
financial standpoint, right? And it takes a
Yeah.
lot of carrots, onion, celery to make the difference on 2 cases of tenderloins, maybe some lip-ons, and pick another item, right? The invoice total on that is totally different than that of
It's a lot.
produce.
It's a lot. Yeah. A produce truck can be a 17 footer can be 17 feet full of produce. and equal a protein truck with one pallet. So
Oh yeah, I've got produce background myself, and knowing that went through a lot of acquisitions, and when we'd acquire a company, maybe it was just a seafood company, you would get their staff, the drivers would come along, but their drivers are just used to carrying maybe a little tub of scallops and three other species, a halibut, a snapper, and salmon. So you got four things that you can carry in
yeah,
yourself. As a produce distributor, man, you got a dolly and it's lopsided 5 count watermelon, 2 bags of 50-pound carrots. Then you got potatoes. Then you
it's
got,
potatoes and
it takes 4 times to go to the truck, and it's heavy, and you're in the heat of the summer, and you're just sitting there sweating it out. And, you need a bigger truck. So the dynamics are totally different.
yeah. I always tell my transportation teams in my different divisions, I'm like, if you want to keep a pipeline of drivers, get to know the guys at the produce company. We can change their life.
Oh man, I mean, it's a little bit less complicated, and certainly less backbreaking. You
Yeah.
talked about how when you started just knocking on doors, times were different. There was no Facebook. There was no um, the prospecting tools. The way that you did it was totally different. How has it changed for you from when you started to today, and how are you coaching your sales team to go out, prospect, sell, and be the best for the customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you go back, like even that many years ago, let's go back, gosh, almost right now, it feels like pre COVID, but, that many years ago, you dealt with chefs that were, with the lack of social media, you had guys that knew exactly what they wanted to do day in, day out. They knew what products they wanted to use. And it was just kind of, I don't want to say boring, but it's, the level of what you see on a plate today has evolved so much in that time. And it's because of the availability of information, right? People can see a different picture. A guy in Birmingham or a guy in Nashville here can now look at his favorite chef in New York and say, wow, he's doing that. I want to produce that. So, as a salesperson, one of the big things, you can't fake it in this industry now. You can't just say, I want to take this job and I'm going to go, I've got my price list, I've got my product, and I'm going to go talk to the chef about that. And hopefully he likes my price and likes you actually have to have a little bit of passion about food. Yeah, and you can't fake that. A chef can see right through that. And you have to be able to bring forth some ideas to that chef, that chef who's in today's day and age, who's trying to manage food costs, we're struggling with labor. So they've got so many things else to think about other than the fact they know they want to put something cool on the plate, and they rely on us to be able to tell them, like, to educate them on our products and how to make that thing that, say, Paul out in California is using. And so it takes a lot of self-education on our end and a little bit of passion to be able to approach these guys, much different than it was um, 10, 15 years ago. You can even look at, you said your background's in produce, and then you guys got into acquisitions and you're buying companies. Well, there was a time when it was just the produce company. It was just the meat company. Now we're all kind of picking up, like, we don't do a lot of vegetables and things here. Um, I might carry mushrooms or things like that. But there was a time when I could just be the seafood guy and the meat guy was the meat guy, and everybody had their space. But now, with everybody having to diversify their portfolio, you've got to stay on top of that. And staying on top of that requires a little bit of passion about the food. Even if you don't like something, you've got to understand why somebody else would and how a chef can take that application. So
Yeah, it's
the
extremely
evolution of
difficult.
the food
It's
seller has changed a lot.
it's difficult to be a singular company anymore because of the margins in the industry, and staffing, and all the things. There's a lot of consolidation that's happening, and so what I mean by that is you're seeing just milk companies go away. The cost of delivering just milk doesn't make sense anymore, and most cities used to have two produce companies, two seafood companies, and now that's going away. The distribution business is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of things that go freaking wrong every single day,
Yeah.
and you're only as good as your last delivery. And historically, these business owners who are now approaching, their mid 60s, their son or daughter who was supposed to take over, now moved to LA and one moved to Dallas, and dad's in Birmingham and he works 80 hours a week, 90
Yeah.
hours a week, and he does the invoicing, and everything is on him. And son and daughter saw dad bust it, and they're like, I don't want to do that. I'm an accountant, or I'm whatever I'm doing. And what's left is someone's going to acquire that company. And so I think offering more to your customer is good, but the reality too is, and you probably see it, I mean, look at what Amazon is doing to food service just in general. You can go into almost any restaurant, and I guarantee you they're buying something from Amazon. It could be butcher twine, it could be register tape, it could be sugar packets, but they
Yeah.
are buying something from Amazon because the transaction is easy. And now you have Instacart. If you get on Instacart, Restaurant Depot is on Instacart. You could do
Really?
Costco. Yeah, you can get Costco on Instacart. So if you're a chef and you need an 8-pound flat of strawberries and you need whatever, now it's like for $2 extra, you can get it delivered within 2 hours, right, via Instacart. And so the dynamics of the way that we're accessing product and information has changed. And to your
Yeah.
point earlier, too, is chefs in Nashville see a chef in Portland on Instagram. Oh, ramps just landed. And it's like, oh, well, now inland should have ramps, right? Like, well, in Portland, they're just foraged right here, and the guy brought 12 pounds, and they don't know about the logistical aspects of bringing product into the building. And,
Right.
it
Yeah.
just, that's a challenge in itself.
It is. It is. It's that's the new era of chef too. We didn't used to not have to with the chef 10 years ago. You didn't have to really compete with all those things because he didn't even want to send an email, much less. But the newer chefs, they do their due diligence.
What are you seeing from a chef side in the way that they want to be communicated with, the way that they want to be touched? I think the old school generation was show up at 2 o'clock, take my order. You come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Like that's the engagement. Are you seeing the same? How has that interaction changed?
There's still a lot of that, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
still have a decent amount of that, but you've got a lot of people, and it's not just the chefs these days. It's the restaurant as a whole. We're seeing more GPOs than ever, group purchasing organizations. It used to just be food buy, right? Now you've got food buy, Avenger, Airmark. You've got you've got so many that pop up, and you got a company that pops up in a city like say Nashville, and they've got 10 restaurants that they're in a group, and now they've got some EDI system that you want to order on, and you've handcuffed your chef by food costs. So that's one thing that you have to think about, and you have to have the software and the technology to keep up with. But the ones even the independent chef, they don't have time. And I think it's easy to underestimate labor these days in the restaurants. And so when you have the labor struggles that you have, the chefs don't have time for people knocking on their door. And back to what we've been saying this whole conversation, there's a lot of people out there trying to do this, right? So you have a lot of you got to find your way to get to the chef through the noise, and a lot of them shut down to the noise because they just don't have time. So it's in a perfect world. There's apps now that are making it a lot more easy to do business, but even the app takes away that personal touch when you're dealing with a protein like a fish or things like that. When you're talking about trim specs and things. So again, it goes back to me being very educated, and when you have those few moments with that chef, you got to make them impactful and let them know that I'm the guy that you can count on, not only for a transactional sell, but like we said earlier, mistakes are made every day. I'm the guy that's going to count on, like, anticipate those mistakes for you and do your job basically for you. So you don't have to think about anything but what you want to put on your plate. And if you can convey that message to a chef, you still have those conversations still exist. But then you do have the ones that just want to order out of convenience. And if you can present them with an app that they can scroll through on their phone, you might be their guy. So there's just a lot of different types of personalities out there and a lot of different ways of getting business done now. And I think we're all industry wide are figuring out which one is the one that is the most efficient. And I can't really tell you one's better than the other, but the days of sitting down with one for hours and going through the spec sheet or that's certainly disappearing.
Yeah, I'd agree. Now, you guys, obviously, you said you're in the Nashville warehouse right now. You've got Birmingham, you've got Atlanta, you've got several, warehouses across the Southeast, which means you've got multiple, uh, you know, drivers, salespeople, time zones, customer service to deal with. How do you guys manage that? Like, how do you lead a team? For those people that are aspiring to scale their business, like what are the challenges that you face, or the realities rather, in leading a team when you're trying to communicate via Zoom, or you've got someone in North Carolina that you're trying to, like, develop and really coach up. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's another very thought provoking question on your end. But um, first off, for us, I'm in two different time zones, so I like to just think that everybody just operate on the East Coast. Atlanta's our hub. That's our sun. So revolve around that as far as your time goes. So if my team in Atlanta has to be at a meeting at 9 o'clock, sorry guys in Houston, you got to be there at 8. That's just the way it works. But hey, here's the trade off. Their Monday night football doesn't start till 9, and you guys are watching it at 8 o'clock. So there you go. But it's as far as developing people in that kind of world, I mean, it takes a team, right? I've got a lot of great people that work with, under, and around me, right? It takes leaning on your veterans in each division to lead the way. It takes really good vendors that have a commitment to working with your sales team and are committed to growing your sales team. The most difficult part, I think, for us, being from Houston to Roanoke, Virginia, and having our DCs. I mean, our DCs to date, we have Houston, New Orleans, Orlando, Birmingham, Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte. From a restaurant distribution standpoint, those pallets are so incredibly different. What my top selling items are in Houston aren't the same as my top selling items in Charlotte. You come to a town like Nashville, which is is the fastest growing city in the nation. You've got a lot of transplant chefs who are really quite all over the place with what they want to buy. But so it's recognizing what your region's good at selling that. And I like to think I've got great sales managers that put a lot of time into our sales team. And we're very intentional about training, like today being Friday. And forgive me, I always have to say, for anybody that wants me to talk on a Friday, I've been going all day. We have basically like a show we do every Friday for our sales team. Something we developed during the pandemic to figure out how to stay engaged, where we have teams. We have a setup with a TV and a camera in every distribution center. We have a culinary center in most of our facilities, and our teams get together with whatever product we're talking about. We usually have a playlist that's tied to that meeting. So, everybody can download it on Spotify, and then we open up and, we'll have a vendor and we'll have our teams on. And I like to talk to, have guest speakers from different divisions and, talk about some of the successes and challenges of each division, so everybody feels like they're a part of it. But it's really being intentional about engaging our team and keeping this job like fun, right? Because at the end of the day, we sell meat and seafood. And if we can convey that to our sales staff, that like, hey, listen, I mean, you've been doing this long enough. Like, when you tell somebody what you do, instantly you've got thousands of questions, because you're talking to somebody who may be a bookkeeper at a bank, or maybe they're a branch manager, and they're like, my day kind of sucks, but tell me about yours. And so for us to recognize that in each of our divisions and be proud of what we do and have a passion, like I said earlier, about selling our product, and then from a leadership standpoint, having a passion about teaching our people about our products. And I think, and I'm truly blessed for the sales managers and the veterans that I have in every division, who truly are very passionate about our products, to continuously convey that message no matter what division it's in. So that becomes a standard for inland seafood. So, it was a real challenge at the beginning of the pandemic to figure out how do we keep everybody engaged. But that was one tool that we figured out, being able to create a situation where we can bring the entire company together, talk about how great our week was while recognizing how tough it was to get from Monday to Friday, and then just, sign off with sell strong today, do everything you can so your customer doesn't call you on Saturday. We'll see you again on Monday. And, we live by that. We joke about it and we have a good time with it in every single market, and it works.
What about personal development? Are you seeing consistencies in your top performers in each DC? Are there similarities that they have, right? That they may practice the same things. They're just they're magnets to vendors, right? I think often top performers in distribution, you can see the vendors want to gravitate to them, and they when they walk into a kitchen of a um, somewhere in Nashville that's very coveted, right? Like they own the room, they have that respect. Like, are you seeing consistencies, and how are they developing themselves, or is it just all like I've got it or they don't got it?
There is some of that, but you know, being in sales leadership for most of my working life, I would say in every industry there's a common denominator with your top performers, and it's the ones that you know pay attention to the small things, right? For example, we had a vendor on today who brought up one of the benefit of their product was they're recognized by the American Heart Association, right? Where if you're not like that doesn't seem like that big of a piece of information, but your top performers take that. They remember that kind of stuff. So when they're selling their product, they recognize if they were to go to a retirement home or something, that's a selling point, and they know that, right? They pay attention to those little details that, you know, what makes this product special? What makes this product not special? Like, what's that little story I can tell you about what's going here, about X product? From a product standpoint, from a customer service standpoint, they're better than order takers. They're the guy that's going to let their customers know, hey, there's a hurricane headed to the Gulf right now, and I know you've got this on your menu. It's time to pivot. Even though we're like a week out, maybe that hurricane's going to turn. They're still that far in advance of anticipating their customers' needs. But at the end of the day, it's just how thorough they are. I believe my top performers, in this business, it's easy to get your territory and go out and say, I'm going to see 18 accounts a day, and I'm going to see those 18 accounts every day. And it's so easy to try to move too fast, right? And then next thing you know, you've had great conversations with 18 accounts, and then you moved on to the next 18. You might have closed 5 or 6 of them and maybe developed a good relationship with 2, but you forgot about all these other guys and these other small conversations and these little things. My top performers are going to have 5 to 8 great appointments a day. They're going to sprinkle around some cold calls or see some other accounts, but they're going to be very thorough with a handful of accounts and be very methodical with those. And it's something I like to say, the tortoise won the race. So it's not a speed game, it's a customer service game. And when you recognize your top performers, yeah, they're making great money, but to get there, they put the customer first, and they put everything from their education of their product to how they sorry, somebody knocked my window,
You're
but
good.
from how they educate themselves on the product, what they know about our company and our own capabilities and where we're not strong, they take all that and apply that to the customer in a manner to serve the customer best. And when you go from that standpoint, that's what makes you a top performer, because customers can see that, in my opinion.
I work with a lot of brands within food service, and often launching, or everyone wants to sell more. Like getting into your distributor that's like battle number one. How do you maintain relevancy within your distributor partner when there's a lot of distractions? At Inland, you have probably thousands of SKUs. You've got lots of regions, procurement, sales goals, cold calling. Where's my truck? You screwed up. All the things that happen within. What's the most value that brands can bring to you and your sales team? How can they nurture the relationship and become a stronger partner to you?
Well, I think there's I've noticed in the past, a lot of these vendors, a lot of these guys want to go straight to the purchasing department, because they're trying to sell to the purchasing guy, and hope the purchasing guy makes the orders. And that's the way it's been done. A lot of the I don't think most people recognize this, but a lot of us companies are only really like we might have an origin story that takes us back to like 1900, so we can claim to be 100 years old. But realistically, as far as our real distribution, we're all 40, 50 years old, right? And so that old way of going straight to the purchaser and letting the purchaser sell to the team is has been the way it's done. But I feel like here over the past couple of years, I've seen a transition where you the vendor need to engage those. You need to find me, by the VP of sales, find the person that ignites my sales staff behind something, get with one of my sales managers and get to the salespeople, and then be very intentional about working with that sales staff. Now, granted, you have to come with a great product for a company like ours. I mean, we like to look at ourselves as the Whole Foods of distribution. So you have to come with a product that's got a great story, and you have to be able to support our needs if we take off with it. But you have to have a passion about that product, and you have to engage the sales staff. As a vendor, you should get to know that top seller in every division. You should work with the guy that has potential, that maybe doesn't have the huge book of business, but maybe mentor them a little bit. It takes getting your claws into the entirety of my sales team to get us behind a product. And if you do that, you will be successful you'd be a successful vendor with that company.
Yeah, I think if you invest in the salespeople, I remember early on in my sales days, and more mature salespeople may look to avoid ride-alongs or cultivation because they're so busy, and in some regards, I don't want to say they've made it, but they have made it, right? They've kind of, they can work, dare I say, remote because of their relationship and their impact to the customer. But you've got those rookies out there, you're developing, they're going to be the next person in line to take over, or take that opportunity. So when you're taking a chance, it could be your way into the bigger person because you've impacted and people are seeing success. So I tell all our brands, certainly look to establish relationships at every level: procurement, management, and leadership, because
Yeah.
each of them have different influence in the way that they go about um, impacting. At the end of the day, we all want to move cases. I want to move cases for inland, and I want to move cases for my own group of customers. But how are you maintaining relevancy, and do you follow up and follow through with what you say you're going to do as that brand partner?
Yeah.
What about the impact of digital today, right? We know the web app can be a very impactful tool, but are you seeing individual salespeople um, embrace maybe more of like influencer mentality, right? To be able to like reach a chef or educate themselves, right? Like just we see it in TikTok and Instagram, the influencers of all, but when you really think about the distribution world, it really hasn't hit. Is that an important component to the way that they communicate with people, or how are your sales team leveraging digital to be, more effective with their customers?
I think we're probably like every other company, just really starting to get really good at social media in general, right? I think part of just to kind of give some background to, I think the industry as a whole, where we're at with that kind of stuff. You go back 10 years ago, most owners were like, we can't do that kind of stuff. We can't talk about our customers. We can't promote a customer when we're selling to all these other customers. There was like all this secrecy in our industry, it felt like. And now these days, you're just now starting to see like our social media presence has certainly evolved to a large level. Um, I could see a world. I don't know. That's a great question because I could see it seems like it would be the smart thing to do. Like if you're, say, a Nashville sales rep, to have your own influencing following and talking about product. And we certainly try to bring that from a company standpoint when we have our guest speakers in. I'm sure we'll have a post today about the speaker we had today, which was Ocean Blue Cobio. It's a fantastic product. I'm sure you're familiar. And we'll probably broadcast some of that show. But just from the individual standpoint, I'd love to see it. I think it could be impactful. I feel like I feel like I know of a sales rep that's tried to have somewhat of a podcast in his market, and it developed somewhat of a following. But this industry this is probably the most technologically challenged industry in, as far as major industries in America, right? Like we are, and that's food service as a whole is behind. So, do I see it going to that? Yeah, because our staffs are getting younger and younger, and they're getting better and better with these tools. Um, and I'm not old; I'm only 41, but still, the difference between a 25-year-old and me is tremendous. So, I don't know how impactful that would be. I don't see it that often, but when somebody does bring it, they might change the game from a sales standpoint. I
Yeah,
hope I
I
find
think
them first.
we all need to, utilize the tools around us. We should practice and figure things out and be curious about them, right? And I talked a little bit with friends about the Apple Vision Pro and how is that going to impact food service, right? Imagine if we gave customers, and fast forward several years where you got a better version of it, but open blue cobia, if we were able to give our customers by that point it's commonplace, right? Like everyone
Sure.
has some kind of a
I know
headset.
exactly where you're going because
They've
I
got
was
open
thinking
blue
that.
cobia and I'm touching the fish and I'm grabbing the fish. And then here's the inland order guide. And then I've got a recipe right over here. And now I'm adjusting my menu, all while, multitasking. The reality is if you think about the workflow that you have on your cell phone right now, or your iPhone, Samsung, whatever, 1 minute you're in your text message, the next you're in a Instagram, the next you're in a playlist, the next you're in an email, the next you're banking. All it's doing is bringing it to one experience that changes the dynamics. But imagine
Sure.
an inland warehouse tour that's fully immersive. Imagine, your salesperson being able to look at analytics and, explore menus and communicate differently. It sounds pretty crazy to a lot of people, but 2007 was when the iPhone was first came out, and
Sure.
so many of us had a BlackBerry and said that's the silliest thing in the world.
Would never get away from this BlackBerry. I want to scroll.
Never.
Yeah.
And now
Have
we,
nothing.
are tethered here, right? And I heard a podcast yesterday where it talked about, when the TV really started to get more and more relevant. It took a lot of people that were so used to the radio to convert to the TV. And
Right.
now it's like, in my family, you said you have two teenagers, and I'm sure, they're pretty, I would imagine that they have a cell phone. Is that right?
They're fantastic. I
Yeah.
make my daughter do a lot of stuff for so much stuff for me. I always tell her like, you're going to end up being my assistant. Like she's
But
and what you're
I'm sure
talking
at
about.
dinner, you guys are, or when you're having just chill time, like you have the TV up and like you're sending each other memes, and it's just like that's
Yeah.
kind of the way of the world. And I think about it. I've got a 5 and a 7-year old. It's a different place than you from raising my kids, but my mom sometimes will, like oh, maybe there's too much screen time, right? Or my brother even was kind of my kid will never have any type of an iPad. Now he's got kids. He's like, oh, yep, iPad, right? You
Everybody
use
says
the
that.
tools of the time in order to uh, make yourself more efficient and better. And so we've got to be curious in the way that we don't shut things down. Certainly from a technology standpoint, be curious, experiment, try.
Sure.
And just because you do it once doesn't mean like, if if you're a salesperson trying to produce content, don't just do it once and think it failed. Like you don't go to the gym once and then say, well, I didn't lose weight today. Like I'm giving up, right? Like
Yeah.
do things consistently in order to get to where you want to be.
Well, it's like the Paul brothers, Jake and Logan. Now we're paying pay per view to watch them fight fighters, but they started it off just doing dumb videos a long time ago with no following. And to what you were talking about, I think there is a world that's coming in our industry. There's a world that's coming with that kind of stuff. I look forward to it. I'm trying, and we've got along with our brand change that you tapped on earlier from inland seafood to inland foods. Along with that, we're about to bring a lot to the industry, and we're hoping to be ahead of the curve. We've been behind, but we're hoping to get into some of this stuff quickly because that world is coming, right? It is going to be here where you can hand somebody the VR and like they can do so much. Like, it's out there, and I hope we embrace it, and I think we will, and it's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
So the transition from inland seafood to inland food, wanting to offer customers more diversified products, is there a particular segment that has you guys really excited, like what you guys are doing in a particular category, or something that's just maybe a little bit different than you guys are used to?
I wouldn't say that so much as one of the real catalysts for change was when you walk in and say, I'm with Inland Seafood, the amount of customers that would say, well, I got a seafood guy. Imagine you're coming from Atlanta and your company's named Inland Seafood and you're out selling Charleston, South Carolina. I mean, a guy looks at you and they're like, I got a seafood guy. He's my brother-in-law, man. And so then our conversation for years has automatically had to, for me, it was always like, all right, cool. Let me just cover up seafood. I just won't sell you any seafood. How about your steaks, right? So because our portfolio and what we've seen, in each different market, what we're able to sell, like here in Nashville, if it's still now a big part of Nashville is it needs to have a big bone in it and a big piece of meat attached to that bone on the plate. It's a cowboy town kind of, or it wants to have that fill, right? So we just wanted people to recognize and wanted to make it easier for our sales reps to tell the entirety of our story without being pigeonholed as the seafood guy and having to work their way back from that. Being Inland Foods, I mean, our brands, we put as much into every brand that we do in our seafood. And I don't think there's one that excites me or my sales reps any more than the other. It's just the exciting part of being able to say, we're Inland Foods now, and let me tell you why.
What about the commodity seafood business? That's a tough one, right? I mean, obviously, it's just like the commodity produce business, tomato, onion. You're selling that. And in aquaculture, just in general, right? As an American society, we haven't been trained to eat seafood, right? Like, it just hasn't. I also come from seafood world too, where when I talk to people in the industry, I'm like, guys, you got to remember, did you grow up cooking halibut? Like, it's hard for a family to afford cooking halibut, right?
Sure.
Or striped bass. That's not something that's just like in the repertoire of what you eat, as a just a normal American family. How competitive is that world for if you're in a different segment of distribution? How do you stand out selling, shrimp, salmon, crab? Like, how is that? Talk a little bit about that process.
It's difficult. You're right. Just backtrack. If you're our age and you grew up in the South, your experience with seafood was probably salmon cakes, and it was that double Q can. Unfortunately, I grew up fishing a lot with my dad, so I had a little bit more of a background. But anyway, it's difficult. You know, salmon. People look at salmon, and there's so much misinformation about salmon too. Let's just put that out there. Like one of the things that biggest pet peeve of mine is when I see somebody post on social media about farm salmon or anything, and you hear all the negativity. And it's like, gosh, you just don't know what you're talking about. But salmon has done a good job over the past years of separating itself from a commodity pack where we used to just see commodity Chilean or Norwegian salmon. We're starting to see farmers make a real effort with their products and their stories and their fish feeds and what they're doing to bring forth a product that's as close to wild as possible. And those stories are really helping the selling points, the sustainability stories behind those guys, and even the technology that some of these guys are using. Open Blue is not the only one with the virtual tour these days. We push a brand, Quarre Arctic, out of Norway. It's Norwegian style salmon, and I would challenge anybody to bring forth a better story than that to separate themselves. But there's always going to be a place for your commodity, run of the mill salmon. And for us to separate ourselves, what we do, and we're experts at portion cuts. So one of the things if you need 2,000 pieces of 6-ounce salmon tomorrow and you call me right now, we will produce that for you in whatever shape you want. And that's one thing that helps us have more of a market for that product. Case in, case out salmon, it's become who's the guy with the best price, right? And we certainly want to be that when we can, but we don't try to sell ourselves as that ever. We'd rather sell ourselves as, how we can produce that fish for you, right? When you're speaking of crab and shrimp, I mean, shrimp is, you've got to have like, it's a, that's a tough one. You got to
Mm-hmm.
taste it, right? Like, I live in a world it's, you've got Gulf shrimp, you've got Ecuadorian shrimp, I've got Mexican shrimp, I've got farmed Indonesian shrimp. Now, if you just want to turn and burn at your resort place and you just need something cheap, then you're going to go with the farmed Indonesian shrimp. But there's still shrimp out there that have stories. There's still guys that have good agricultural practices. There's still guys that are going to produce a product, maybe in a salted pen or something that has a little bit more flavor. And when you're talking price, yeah, that can still be a commodity shrimp, and we're talking nickels and dimes per pound different. And so it just becomes to the customer. To me, talking to a customer, it's you're yeah, you rely on seasonal business and you need a cheap product, but during that season, this 10 cents on a better farm commodity shrimp could be the difference in somebody saying they've got a po' boy, I guess we can eat there, or they've got a damn good po' boy because the shrimp's got a little pop to it. So you can still find little jewels in that commodity world, but you can't just take every product, right? And that's one thing we try to do, is not take the cheapest thing. Yeah, we have to compete, have to have a commodity product, but can we find a commodity product that still puts forth the effort to produce a good commodity product? And that's the same with crab. And when you say crab, I would imagine we're talking blue crab, red swimming crab, not the king crab, snow crab world, because
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different ballgame. But you've got, there's companies that puts crab in a can, and there's companies that puts really good crab in a can, and it's all a matter. And as far as that goes, I think that even goes down to how that company treats its employees. And when you have a company that cares about its employees, cares about the products they're putting in the can, you can produce a better commodity product. You can get like we sell commodity canned crab, but what you're going to get from us, because we do vet our vendors, is, let's say it's a jumbo lump. Well, if you buy the cheap commodity crab where they're paying these guys, X amount of dollars to pick jumbos, and then they pay them a little less when they pick lump or special, or, for anybody that's watching this podcast, there's only two jumbo lumps on a crab. So when you get a 1 pound can, that's a lot of crabs right there, So, and special, those are all different parts of the animal. And so when you have these companies that don't care about, they care about the bottom line and they don't treat their employees well, you might get a can of jumbo lump that's, and you've seen it, all lump on the top, and then you get like the junk in the bottom, because that employee is trying to maximize what their take home to their family, right? But then you've got great companies out there that are like, you're my employee, you're sitting here, produce a pound, I'm going to pay you a fair wage for every pound produced. And that makes a difference in what shows up in the can. And that's still a commodity product, and you're going to pay a little bit more for that, but you're going to get more bang for your buck. And that commodity product, I mean, it sucks to have to group some of these guys in with the other guys that are just turn and burn. There's a market for all of that, but at Inland Seafood, there's not. We want to, even on the value added line, we want to bring you the best product that we can find. And to find the best product, you have to have the best companies that do the best things for the environment and do the best things for their employees. And that shows up in the product you purchase.
Well, and at the end of the day, I don't seafood, meat, produce. It can all be compared to a commodity. I mean, you can justify it one way or another: prime, Japanese, Wagyu, Australian, American, but there's going to be a justification point on price, based off of whatever circumstance. I think the more savvy distributors are really going to look and vet what's the best product that I can buy and provide for my client base, meaning you have good, better, best options. And not every restaurant wants a romantic story of a hand picked, hand stuffed, this, that, or the other. It's like, hey, I just need a fresh piece of fish and I'm searing it. And you know, we're a restaurant that a family comes to twice a week, and we just want to have an affordable experience, right? And then
Sure.
you've got Michelin experience, 3-star, where literally every component is cared for and you know where everything is. And I think our job as a salesperson or a distributor partner is just like, what's the application? What are you doing? Like, I can't just
That's the best
necessarily.
question any of us can ask a chef.
Yeah, what are you doing, and
Yeah.
how much, and how consistent is it one time? You can look at your best country club, and they're going to have a banquet for 300, and a bride and groom only have X amount, and they're going to need a salad and an entree with a protein, two veg, and a dessert. And then you're going to have someone where it does not matter what the price is, and I want the absolute best of the best. And chefs have the opportunity to create and
Yeah.
have more fun with the menuing. But I think it's, how are you curating a product mix that's appealing to a segment, and then understanding, chef, what are you doing so I can put you in the best vehicle for that application? And if you do that, you're going to be better off. You're going to be a better partner to that restaurant, and they're going to see you as a true partner, as opposed to, hey, I can beat that price, right? Beat that price. If
Yeah.
if that's what you're doing, all you're going to do is set yourself up as being the low price, and you're going to lose at some point.
You're going to lose to the next guy with the lowest price. And there's always that guy out there. We'd all love for every restaurant to be the Michelin fun restaurant that's got no budget that we can all sell to, but that's not the nature. We'd all like to make $1 million, right? And we
Right.
don't. So that's because that's not the nature of the industry. Like we have to have something for every level. And, I mean, that's the nature of America. We're a big country with a lot of people that we have to feed. So there's a place for all of it out there, but it's back to, like you said, to whatever chef you're talking to, what are you trying to get done? What are you trying to execute? What's your application?
So we've talked a lot about innovation, kind of how the industry's changed, how we approach customers. Inland 2030, where do you see the vision of what you guys are doing, the way that you serve, the way the customer interacts with you, right? How are you guys adapting in today's society? Obviously, you're investing in new categories, but like, what's that experience, in your opinion, look like for a customer in Atlanta in 2030?
It's well, definitely more technology, right? I have a really ambitious idea of lots of automation in our world, right? I mean, because let's fish cutters aren't being born every day. Like we're not, they're just not.
Nobody wants to sit in the cold and sit and cut fish.
Yeah, nobody
Very
wants to
few,
put
let
on
me
a
say.
yeah, people don't want to put on freezer suits anymore and do this. So, our world's going to have to evolve in the automation um, for the sake of food costs. Bottom line, when you're looking at the amount of wages is along with the amount of labor that you're losing, like we're going to have to be an automated world. And that automation, I don't think, some people talk about, using technology by way of apps and things like that for order entry. And I could see that coming down the road. I think there's always going to be a need for salespeople. So I don't think that there's a replacement coming for there, but I do think there's going to be a lot of technology. And, what we're seeing with AI to me is incredible. I can see the scary side of it. I watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day when I was a kid too. So there is a part of me that's freaked out by that. But I can see where AI can do a lot of things as far as looking at a chef's menu, analyzing his style of cooking, looking at my inventory, and helping produce ideas for that person, right? But there still has to be that human element of making sure that product gets to that customer on time or to connect that customer to my business, right? But the whole world is moving. It's from a technological standpoint is moving so fast, and it won't be long before it's in our industry way more than it has been. You take a farm salmon, for instance. Like, I mean, there's already companies out there that have the vision systems and the machines that you drop that fish in there and it's boom, it's done. And we need more of that. It's the tricky part that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to fish is like nobody thinks about. It's the last thing we hunt, right? There's nothing else out there that everything else is farm. There is farm fish, but it's the last thing commercially that guys go out and grab. So you get product that's got different sizing, right? And because of that, we've been hesitant. I think companies have been hesitant to try to figure out, like the smart people companies, the tech companies have been hesitant to try to figure out how to take us to that level where we can use less hand labor. But I think it's almost a necessity at this point, because we are in a point where people can't afford, like people are, it's getting harder and harder to afford to eat. I mean, we've heard it on the news. A Big Mac is costing people $18 in some parts of this country. People are wanting to increase minimum wage. They were talking about in California, $50. Here in Nashville, they're proposing 20. And the market's already asking for that for a warehouse guy. But at what point can I continue to raise wages for labor that's getting harder and harder to find? Because it doesn't matter how much you want to pay somebody. I can pay somebody $100 to cut fish. If they can't cut fish, they can't cut fish, right? So we have to, that technology is going to have to, for the sake of the Americans' pocketbooks, get us to that point by 2030, I think.
I
And
would agree. I mean, I think to keep prices at a manageable level, and why maybe in aquaculture we see, if you go to Cena or you talk to anybody in the industry, we need more people eating fish. Well, it's inherently more expensive than just a pork tenderloin, a pork loin, ground beef. I mean, if you think about the way the most American shoppers shop at the grocery store, those are the proteins that they're buying. It has to be below a certain amount. So, for us to be able to have automation to level out some of the cost of producing that product is critical, for us to see more and more sales. And, I think about when, I had a friend who had, his father or his stepdad was a chiropractor, and I grew up in Houston. I went to public school, and I didn't have a lot of like wealthy friends. Like if you were that was like you were rich,
right.
And he had a plasma TV, and I was like, oh my gosh! And he's like, yeah, it cost $16,000, and now we can buy a freaking 70-inch TV for $450.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
the automation will reach a point to where it's an attractive part to implement into your business. So for business owners that are looking for solutions, hey, prices are going to come down as more and more people adapt to it. The last thing as we wrap up, being a leader in your organization, it's not a small organization. You lead a lot of people. We are left having to develop, encourage, motivate everybody below you. How do you find encouragement? Who and what motivates you to, inspire others?
Oh, that's the first easy question you've asked me. um, I I've been in this business long enough to, in a leadership position. Um, and actually, I even came to Inland just to be a sales rep. I was running from being director of sales and marketing of a produce company, but I came here just to be a sales rep, and I was good with that. But, I just kind of naturally like to bring up others around me, right? And I've had the pleasure in this business to hire people that maybe were working out of a kitchen or, had a job like I did at a Sprint. I love getting like the person that has like that's working for Rico or selling copy machines for
Mm.
75K, and they've worked that job really, really hard and for not so great. And they've gotten into this business and had a great time. Or like the chef that decided one day, I want to go sell something. And we just picked up a young lady here recently who was selling roofing equipment for the past 2 years. She got out of the kitchen. She just wanted to do something different with her life. And then I've had countless chefs that, and to me, these are guys that, and I've heard the stories. They have like an older brother or older sister that maybe went off to school and got their masters, and like, they got to show up on Thanksgiving, day to the family get together, and mom and dad's all proud of their kid with the master's degree who went on and did great things from college. And then you've got, well, he's a chef, he's doing his thing, he's still trying to figure it out. But then they come into my industry and find success in sales, and next thing you know, it's a totally different person. They dress different, they act different, they're in a professional atmosphere where they've been able to flourish. And so taking people out of that didn't think they had an opportunity to let's face it, make the kind of money you can make selling food, and teach them everything about this product. People know I'm passionate about this stuff. I hope you can tell that. I hope anybody that watches this podcast can tell I'm very passionate about this stuff. And to be able to take somebody and share that passion with them and watch them develop that and watch them develop into a fantastic sales rep and, go from an apartment to a new car to a purchased home to a married with kids and a family and feel like there's somebody has been the greatest joy of my tenure here at Inland Seafood. And that's the greatest part of what I do every day outside of, being the coolest neighbor in my neighborhood because I have all the meats, right?
You have all the good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. My backyard's the fun backyard, but you know, watching other guys in my, people that we've hired turn into that person. That's, it's just, it's a joy to watch. It's a joy to watch people get around these products and sell them and get passionate about them. I've met some of the, you know, best people, some of the greatest people in the world. I think you and I spoke previously about mentors in this game. I mean, I've met some guys, I can't think of one in particular, but there's a couple that stand out. This guy, Bruce, rest in peace, that used to work for a company, Meats Violins, like the coolest meat seller I've ever met, who was just like, Brad, we're the luckiest guys on earth. And I got my friend Bill, who, if you've ever heard the name Bill Hewitt, they should just he should be in a dictionary beside a picture of salmon. Yes, sir, Mr. Bill, right? Like to know guys like that in this industry that have been doing it for years, that are just like, so just, like we cheated at life doing what we do. I mean, that's what food service distribution can bring to you if you embrace it, love it, and get into it. It's like I get to do this for a living every day. It's fantastic. So, I mean, I wake up every day with that, and I try to hope that we convey that message to our sales staff every day.
We have the chance in food service distribution to impact an anniversary, a birthday, a special occasion in ways that, maybe you don't think about it that way. But when you go eat at a restaurant, they're celebrating, they're coming together, especially today, if you're a lawyer, accountant, if you're in whatever sales, when you fly in for work, it's like, oh, I'm going to Nashville for work. I got to go hit these places, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
going to go do your work and then you're figuring out, how do I go eat breakfast here? How do I go over here when you're on vacation? What am I doing for, food? Like we are so connected more than we think. And it's so cool to walk in and know that you had, you impacted the way that product got on the menu. And it's even
Yeah,
cooler when chef comes out and he's like, hey man, it's so good. Thanks for all the hard work. And, your,
yeah,
your friends are like, wait, what? This
yeah,
is so cool, and I think we forget we're often our own biggest critics, and especially in food, where it's like we screwed up, we screwed up, we screwed up. We didn't talk about how many times we did things right today. All we focus on is poor quality here, mispick here, this. But collectively, we shipped how many cases or how many
right.
pieces, and then we had how many errors. Like proportionally, we're doing pretty good, and we forget that. And I think the power of a thank you to your group, right? I don't care if you're in production and dispatch and whatever, like just being able to say a thank you, you're doing a good job, can go so far for people. And I think for anybody out there listening, hey, don't forget the power of thank you. Like if you're a leader,
Right.
it's free to say that, and it can be more meaningful to that individual that you recognize me. Like, hey, you recognize that I did something good. That's going to fire up that person to do better, and you're going to try to get those results. So don't forget to say thank you. Any last parting words for anyone in distribution aspiring to be better, or maybe just trying to you know get to the next level in their career?
It's like I think I said earlier, they never forget that the tortoise won the race, right? It's not about how fast you can add new products. It's not about how fast you can see more people. Yes, there's got to be a sense of urgency in what you're trying to do, but you want to execute the little things very, very well and move on to the next thing and be calculated with it. You want to be very intentional about everything you do, but to try to take it all on at once can really mess you up because there's so many things that can go wrong in what we do. But be good at what you do and put your customer first. Like everything, always remember everything we're trying to do to get that piece of 6 ounce portion, whatever, on the plate. And we're trying to make that chef's life easier. And if you do that methodically, you can be successful in this game.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Yellock of Inland Foods, VP of Sales, thank you for dropping in with us. We appreciate your time, and we hope to have you on again soon. Thanks again.
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me. I hope this takes off. I hope a lot of people get to know about our little world that we have fun in.
It's a fun world, and having an insider track on really how food gets to the table. I don't think the stories have been told enough about the work the drivers, the warehouse, the farms put in. Right, we see it at the chef level, but there's so many great people that make the food world happen, and we're a critical piece of that. And also making the world smaller. Like the challenges, if you're a sales rep and you have a short, you've got a mispick, and you've got poor quality. Guess what? It happens to every single one of us in
Yeah,
every
just breathe.
distribution
You'll be
company.
fine. Yeah.
Like it's fine. You're
Yeah.
fine, but develop relationships. Go outside of your circle. Reach out to people, and that's how you develop and sharpen your skills. So, again, thanks for joining us. And if you're out there, follow Inland Foods on Instagram, right?
Yes. Yes. You can follow us
See
on
what they're up to,
Instagram. I don't believe
and
we're on Facebook,
give
but
them a follow, and look for more innovation from them. Thanks again, Brad.
thanks, Ian.